Once upon a time, arcades were the place to see the latest and greatest video games. Arcade machines were more powerful than home consoles, so to see the most impressive games, you went to the arcade. During this era in the early 90s, we saw Konami release a wave of arcade beat-em-ups. Konami took well-known IPs, created beat-em-ups based on them, and these games are still considered to be the best in the genre to this day. One of these titles was the Simpsons Arcade, a classic game both for fans of The Simpsons and beat-em-ups. After Konami released the Simpsons Arcade, they released Bart's House of Weirdness for MS-DOS and moved on from The Simpsons, leaving Acclaim to disappoint Simpsons fans for many years to come. People loved The Simpsons Arcade though, so after Acclaim left the franchise in 1995 and Fox Interactive took over, it became possible for Konami to return as long as Fox Interactive was on board. Fox Interactive had a strong start with their own Simpsons games. They helped reset the franchise by releasing a cartoon editor and a game that let you fully explore Springfield. After releasing these two games, Fox Interactive started shifting more to licensing their franchises to other publishers, and in the year 2000, they co-published a new Simpsons Arcade game with Konami. Konami was back, and they could finally give the fans what they wanted. The stage was perfectly set. Fox Interactive were taking good care of things, and Konami could finally make a sequel to the most beloved Simpsons game. I can't wait to see what they came up with. Is this a bowling game? Where's the Simpsons Arcade 2? A new beat 'em up with updated graphics that pulls from the golden age of the show. How did we get bowling instead? To try and answer this question, we need to take a brief look at how arcade games changed during the 90s. As I said previously, the arcades were originally a huge part of gaming. The peak of the arcade as a dominant force was the late 70s and early 80s, where big games weren't just popular among gamers, they became cultural icons that are still known to this day. Jump forward to the early 90s, and the arcade still had must-play games, with the likes of Konami's beat-em-ups, Street Fighter II and Mortal Kombat. Consoles were slowly improving and becoming more popular though, and while there was an awkward phase when they transitioned to 3D, the dream of arcade quality games you could play at home became a reality. You could play fully 3D games on your TV, and not just that, but games were now big adventures with worlds to explore and proper storylines to get lost in. Games were breaking away more and more from the norms established in the arcade to take full advantage of being video games that people could play at home. It wasn't about chasing high scores or seeing how long you could survive in one run. Games outside the arcade could be much more than that. The PlayStation also meant gaming was cheaper than it had ever been, in part thanks to using CDs rather than cartridges, meaning more and more people had consoles in their homes. Arcade machines still existed, and there were successful arcade games released during the late 90s, and of course they still exist to this day, but they had to adapt and find their own niche by offering experiences that were more difficult to do at home. The gap in graphics was much smaller than it used to be, and arcade games couldn't compete with the scope and depth of their console competitors. Light gun games like Time Crisis and House of the Dead were popular, and in 1998, Dance Dance Revolution was released, which created a new genre and changed arcades forever. Where at the start of the 90s, you went to the arcade to go one-on-one with a friend in a top-end fighting game, now you were more likely to do that at home, and would play something different at the arcade. It wasn't just focused on hardcore experiences anymore, apart from, well, maybe in Japan. In the West, arcades were shifting away from being pure video games and became more geared towards groups of friends hanging out with some time to kill, or a family who wanted to have some fun while on a day out together. Konami themselves were leading the charge on this new wave of arcade games, releasing many different versions of Dance Dance Revolution and Beatmania. It was this version of Konami that got the Simpsons license back for another arcade game, and developed a new game that made sense for what they saw as the new market for the arcades. A market that was more casual, with a focus on games that were easy for people to jump into and offered unique control schemes. Sports games very much fitted within this mold for an arcade game. You could create bespoke machines that emulated parts of playing a sport, and have that appeal to more people. sports are universal, and it would take until 2006 for consoles to fully catch up to the arcades when it came to emulating sports. This environment within the arcade led to Konami releasing the game that we are looking at today, the Simpsons Bowling. The Simpsons Bowling released in arcades in the year 2000, although it's not clear exactly when. The Simpsons Wiki says the 16th of October, although they don't quote any sources to back this up. It likely is October, as that's the most common date online. I just usually like to verify release days with sources from the time, like a magazine or press release, which I wasn't able to do for the Simpsons Bowling. I checked Konami's arcade website from 2000, using the Wayback Machine, and while there aren't any articles or pages about the game on there, you can see it listed as an option for the website's game locator. In March 2000, the Simpsons Bowling wasn't listed, but in June 2000 it was. It implies June might have been the release date, although with no other references to the game on the official site, I can't say this is definitive proof, so let's stick with October instead. Konami did develop and publish the game, but this wasn't the original team that made The Simpsons Arcade. The Simpsons Bowling was developed by Konami Amusement of America, a specific branch of Konami that wasn't based in Japan. Konami was struggling to get a big hit in American arcades following the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so they set up a branch in Chicago whose goal was to focus on the US market. Konami Computer Entertainment Chicago was established in 1995. They started releasing games but didn't make anything of real note. They got renamed to Konami Amusement of America, they still didn't make anything of note, and eventually got moved to California, where the development team was seemingly disbanded and the name Konami Amusement of America was completely dropped. The majority of people on the small team that developed The Simpsons Bowling didn't seem to stick around in the games industry. A notable exception is Clark Wen, whose first game he worked on after he left Konami was Metroid Prime as an audio lead. The person in charge of audio for one of the greatest games ever made had recently finished up working on a Simpsons Bowling game that nobody remembers. Unsurprisingly, there isn't much else to add here in terms of development and history. Fox Interactive was starting to license out The Simpsons to other developers, Konami was trying to break back into the US arcade market, they were focusing their arcade division on casual games for the US, so they had a small team put out a bowling arcade cabinet, by combining a popular US franchise and a popular well-known sport. There's lots of candidates for the most forgotten or most niche Simpsons game, and The Simpsons Bowling is right up there, with how few people ever played it in the arcades or even knows of its existence. It was included with the Arcade 1-Up re-release of The Simpsons Arcade back in 2021, but people who bought that machine were doing it for The Simpsons Arcade, not really this game. I've never played it before, so I'll be checking it out for the first time, to see if it really is just a Simpsons Bowling game or if there's anything more interesting to find by digging into it properly. The first question we need to answer is, how do you play The Simpsons Bowling nowadays? Well, you have three potential options. The easiest option for most people is emulation. For arcade games, you can use the MAME emulator to play it on your PC or any other supported device. MAME is an amazing preservation project, and it's a great way to experience many hard to find arcade games, but it's not perfect. In the case of The Simpsons Bowling, it's playable in MAME but has one obvious bug. None of the dialogue works, which means you get moments like this. Everything else is intact in MAME, and you can even use a trackball to get closer to the actual arcade experience. It's just without the dialogue, you're missing out on too much of the game. It's okay for a casual look, but it's not good enough for myself when trying to perform a deep dive on the game. I also believe this bug causes a delay when transitioning over to a character talking, meaning you get these awkward pauses that the actual game doesn't have. Another modern solution is to track down the Arcade 1-Up re-release of The Simpsons Arcade. It only released a few years ago, so it should be fairly easy to find, right? Well, this isn't something you can purchase anymore, so if you want one, you need to find someone selling it second-hand. It's also much easier to find in America than the rest of the world, but even if you live in America, you're paying hundreds of dollars to own it, and you need the space to store it in your house. There's the potential of finding it in an actual arcade, but I haven't been able to track one down in England. It's actually very common to see the Simpsons Arcade in arcades and barcades across the country. They're just never the arcade 1-up version, so don't include the Simpsons Bowling. That leaves the final option, and that's finding an original arcade cabinet of the game. This has similar issues to the arcade 1-up release, only made even harder as it was released back in 2000. The Simpsons Bowling hasn't remained popular like the Simpsons Arcade has, so it's much less likely for an arcade to still have the machine. It's difficult to purchase, and it's difficult to find in the wild, with your chances once again increasing if you live in America. In my search for the original cabinet, I came across the website arcademuseum.com, or Museum of the Game as it's listed on top of the site. This website has a giant list of arcade games, with a page on each of them, like a mini wiki. On the page for Simpsons Bowling, it gives 2 locations to find the original arcade machine, one in Canada and another in Germany. I live in England, so the German location is closer, but obviously I'm not going to travel all the way to Germany just to play the Simpsons Bowling.
At Meridian Water. This train
Next stop will be Harlow Town. We'll sort it. See it, say it, sorted.
Yes, I did go to the German city of Karlsruhe, and the next day I got up and spent some time exploring the city. I found myself at the zoo, which was a really nice place to explore, but you're not watching this to hear me talk about how cool penguins are, so let's jump ahead to later that day. I headed over to an estate which was off a main road behind a McDonald's and KFC, and found myself at Retro Games. I wasn't filled with confidence when I first arrived, as it looked like I was outside a rundown warehouse. I rang the buzzer next to the door, but got no response. After standing outside for a while, I decided to be brave and opened the door to go inside. I was greeted by a man called Sebastian, and after he gave me a tour of the place, I finally came across what I had travelled all the way to Germany to see, a working arcade cabinet of the Simpsons Bowling. I had spent months trying to find a good way to play this game, and this did all feel a bit crazy, going all the way to Germany just for this one game. When I started playing the Simpsons Bowling for real, I was so relieved that I hadn't travelled all this way for nothing. Normally Retro Games is only open on Saturday evenings, but to ensure I could play the Simpsons Bowling for as much as possible, I emailed them ahead of time and booked it out for myself. I had an entire warehouse of arcade machines to play, but I was focused on the Simpsons Bowling, as I only had limited time to play it. Before I move on to the game itself, I need to give a shout out to Retro Games. Retro Games is an arcade and video game museum which allows people to come and play any of the machines they have. They have some of the usual classics, but also some interesting oddities like the original release of Pac-Man back when it was called Pluckman. They also have a Japanese game where you pedal on a bike which blows air at you to simulate flying in the sky, and they have the pinball machine Hercules, which is the largest pinball machine ever commercially produced. They even had the original Simpsons pinball machine, which I sadly didn't end up playing. Oh hey, it's another green shirt Bart sighting, that's pretty neat. I'm not sponsored by Retro Games or anything, although they did give me a free mug if that counts as selling out. It was extremely cool seeing all the history and hanging out with Sebastian and the owner Kay and chatting with them about the collection. They are all volunteers, and that means all these machines are available to play due to these people's passion for video games, and it's that same passion that allowed me to properly play the Simpsons Bowling. Between Tapped Out and Fortnite, I've spoken in the past a lot about games preservation, and it was quite humbling to meet people who are putting in the effort to ensure older games are still around to play. They were also very accommodating of me recording footage, turning off all the other machines and the lights. The footage admittedly looks a little rough. I'm pretty inexperienced when recording CRT screens, so it's not a clean recording. It is what it is, and I'll be using emulator footage for most of the video instead. I had a great time visiting, and if you're ever in Karlsruhe, go stop by and say you were sent by that weird Englishman who was obsessed with the bowling game. Okay, let's start by looking at the machine itself. We of course have the screen in the middle, with artwork above and below it. At the top on the marquee, we see the logo for the game, and artwork showing off the 8 playable characters. Looks like we have a mix of new and existing artwork. Any Simpsons fan would recognise that picture of Marge, and Homer, Apu, Bart and Mr. Burns are all wearing bowling shirts, which I believe makes this new artwork. Below the screen there's a nice set of images with Bart, Lisa and Maggie all holding bowling balls. The controls are located below the screen on the panel, where there's 3 buttons and a trackball. On the left, there are scratched out letters saying El Barto was here, although some of the letters are partially covered. On the right there's a scorecard being filled in by Homer, where he refers to Bart as the boy. The panel also has bits and food and gum as part of the artwork, a nod at people not treating arcade machines properly and leaving food on them. The most distinct thing about the machine is its use of purple. The background for everything is purple, with a squiggly pattern all over it. I believe what they were going for is to try and recreate the aesthetic of a bowling alley. It's a specific vibe where random patterns and odd colours are used. I can't speak to going to bowling alleys in the 90s in America, but even to this day, there's something about a carpet in a bowling alley that gives it its own unique feel. I'm not sure if this pattern quite hits the mark, but I appreciate the effort, and it does help give it that late 90s, early noughties aesthetic. You may be a bit confused looking at this machine if you've played the original version of this game, and that's because this appears to be a reproduction unit. I asked the people at Retro Games about where they got the machine, and they said it was donated by someone, and they've been maintaining it for years, so they were unclear on its exact origin. This version looks a little plain, and by looking in the manual, you can see that this machine doesn't quite match the original. There's supposed to be these decals on the side of the machine, featuring the logo and character images that you can see on the marquee, and the panel is meant to be much longer. The artwork extends so there's more food to see, which includes the pink donut. It does mean that this machine doesn't stand out as much as the original likely did. While this isn't a problem nowadays, back in the peak of arcades, it was critical that your machine stood out. Whether an arcade machine was successful or not came down to that moment when someone was browsing at the arcade and sees your machine. Does that person decide to stop, go over, and then spend their money? It doesn't matter if it's the best game in the world, if people in that moment aren't drawn to the machine and aren't interested enough to spend their money on it, then the machine has failed. How a machine looked and the attract mode it plays was very important. It had to stand out. There were a few ways to do this. Great looking artwork, an exciting attract mode showing off amazing graphics, interesting control setups, or even the physical design of the machine itself. While I like the style and look that they went for with the Simpsons Bowling, it's hard to say that it really does enough to pull people over. If we look at the original arcade game for The Simpsons from 1991, it does its job much better. This doesn't have a complicated or unique design, but the artwork screams The Simpsons, and it draws your eye with its blue background and images of cartoon characters. It also has an attract mode, which is a recreation of the opening of the show, which then goes into gameplay, which has bright and colourful graphics. The attract mode for The Simpsons Bowling, on the other hand, is this. There's not much Simpsons-y about this, only bowling. It does fairly show off the game, sure, there's just no punch to it. This might feel harsh to focus so much on this aspect of the game, but it really is important to get this right, and for a 2000 arcade machine, this doesn't feel like something that could have really held its own against what else was in arcades at that time. Even with the extra decals on the side, I think it easily could have got lost in a bigger arcade. Perhaps that's more to do with the premise of the game rather than the actual design of the machine itself. After you do go over to the machine and start playing, the core gameplay is, well, bowling. Each game you play takes you through 10 frames of bowling, and that's your lot. To control the game, you have the select button and the trackball that you can spin in any direction. In order to bowl, you first have to decide how you want to curve your ball. You do this by spinning the trackball to the left and right and pressing select to confirm. Next, you decide where you want your character to stand, which is also done by spinning the trackball to the sides and pressing select. Finally, you then have to bowl the ball, and this is done in 2 ways. Before you start playing, you can choose between normal or easy controls. For the easy controls, you simply have to spin the trackball forward, which acts as a simplified version of bowling a bowling ball. If you're using normal controls, then there's a timing element where you have to bowl at the correct time as a white line goes around a circle. If you bowl in the red, then that counts as a failed attempt, and your character does a silly animation where they don't throw the ball. When you spin the trackball, you can also spin it more to the left or right in order to send the ball in that direction. So a hard spin to the top right will send the ball more to the right side and likely into the gutter. Gameplay wise, that's about it. There's a few extra elements that I'll talk about in a bit, but the majority of your time with the game is choosing your curve, lining up your shot, and rolling the trackball forward. When I was playing this game on the emulator, I was a bit worried. It's 2 button presses and rolling the ball for every single frame, and it got repetitive very quickly. Luckily, it's a much more engaging experience when playing on the actual machine. There's this kinetic feeling when rolling the actual trackball, and it's much more satisfying to bowl when you're physically performing this action. It's simple and it's very to the point, but it's certainly fun. There were a couple of oddities I experienced when playing on the actual arcade machine. It's very easy to roll the trackball, but the game was inconsistent with registering the ball being rolled. As an example, when I was inputting my name on the high score screen, sometimes I could control it easily, and sometimes I couldn't go up and down at all. This translated over to gameplay, where I had to roll the trackball pretty hard for it to work. It actually wasn't too bad, and it made it more satisfying to do ultimately. I ended up using my palm to roll, and that made it consistent. I just couldn't roll it gently. It makes it harder to recommend for kids, although I suspect this was more an issue with this individual machine than an issue with the game itself. Something else I couldn't get a feel for is the speed of the ball. A big part of bowling is how quickly you can bowl, and a faster ball likely means you can knock down more pins, assuming you can still aim the ball correctly. The speed of the ball in the Simpsons Bowling does vary, it's just I couldn't figure out why. Sometimes the ball would go very fast, and sometimes it would go much slower. I tested this both on an actual machine and in the emulator, and it just seemed random. Spinning the ball quicker didn't line up with the ball going faster. In the emulator, I assigned rolling the trackball to up on my keyboard, which meant I could use the exact same input with every throw. When using the same input every single time, sometimes the ball went fast and sometimes it went slow. I thought it might be a timing thing, but this happened with the easy controls as well. It's strange, and it means when going for strikes, you can't rely on getting a fast ball every time. Aiming the ball is much more important than the speed, so as long as you come up with a method of getting strikes for both a slow and fast ball, then you should be fine. As the core gameplay is so stripped back and focused on only doing one thing, it really is just bowling. It's hard to critique what works and what doesn't by directly talking about the game. There's no levels to break down or any type of progression. You bowl and eventually you stop bowling. To go beyond saying it's a bit of fun, I have 2 questions I want to try to tackle. The first question is, how well does this recreate and gamify bowling? The Simpsons Bowling didn't do anything new as far as arcade bowling games go. From what I can tell, the first arcade bowling machine to use a trackball was Capcom Bowling back in 1988. There weren't that many bowling trackball games before 2000, but there were enough that I would say The Simpsons Bowling was taking something that was established already and adding The Simpsons to it, something that the 3D games did numerous times over the years. Of course, this style of arcade game doesn't one-to-one recreate bowling. The Simpsons Bowling doesn't have you physically throw a ball at pins, and considering a popular place to find arcade machines is at a bowling alley, it's important that the game brings something else to the table. when video games recreate an activity, the successful ones aren't the ones that are the most realistic, but instead feature gameplay that makes up for what you lose when you turn the activity into a video game with something else, to make something engaging on its own. Outside of the game being Simpsons themed, I don't think it did that at all. It's almost too faithful to bowling. It all takes place in a standard bowling alley and you play through 10 frames of normal bowling. Each game takes about 5 minutes to play through, and if you play with 4 people, well then it takes 4 times as long, so you're playing for 20 minutes. That's 20 minutes of people taking turns to bowl and then waiting for the other 3 people to have their turn. This is fine for real life bowling where you have a space to hang out and you're physically moving bowling balls, but it makes less sense as an arcade game. It's great that they support 4 players, but it's hard not to see this as a worse bowling experience. The bowling in this game is fun to do, it's just much more mechanically basic and less physical than real bowling. They didn't add much to bowling when translating it into a video game, and it means it makes less sense as a 4-player activity. It's just bowling but worse. Still fun at times, but lesser and lacks any unique elements to separate it from traditional bowling, which means it struggles to stand on its own as a video game. There is one element that they added which you won't find in bowling. If you're able to get 3 strikes in a row, you earn a special ball to use on your next turn. There's 4 you can get. There's the fireball, Maggie, reactor waste and the bomb. The fireball sets the pins alight, Maggie slides down and has a bigger impact on the pins somehow, the reactor waste melts the pins like acid, and the bomb explodes. There's a nice touch in the game where after someone uses a special ball, its impact carries over into the next turn, like seeing Maggie crawl out of the ball return. These help the game feel more Simpsons themed and shakes up the gameplay so it isn't just regular bowling. Unfortunately from a gameplay perspective, they're a little worthless. If you're good enough to get 3 strikes in a row, then you're good enough at the game to consistently get strikes. The only reason you would want to use a special ball is to guarantee you get a strike, but it can actually be harder to get a strike with the special balls. If you have to use the bomb for example, it's easy for a pin to remain standing even though it causes an explosion. You can sometimes be better off bowling normally than using a special ball, which oddly makes this more of a handicap for players who are good at the game rather than a reward. They're fun to see and use the first time, and then you start dreading them appearing once you're good at the game. The second question I want to tackle for the Simpsons Bowling is that if we accept that the gameplay can be quite fun, is it worth replaying? Are there reasons to check out the game whenever you see it in an arcade? Well, the answer is sort of. In terms of the standard game mode, the reason you would play it again would be to improve at the game to get a higher score or to play against your friends. This is where the Simpsons Bowling hits a bit of a wall early on. Getting a strike gives you the maximum points in bowling, and you need to get all strikes in order to get a perfect score. It means once you can consistently get a strike, you've hit the skill ceiling. This is surprisingly easy to do. You can set your curve and position manually, so once you find a path where you get a strike most of the time, it's already game over. For me, I would curve the ball as much as possible and aim for the center. 9 times out of 10, I would get a strike. I found a video online that shows someone getting a strike with all characters, and they didn't curve the ball at all, or would slightly aim off center. You at least do have to move or curve your shot every time, as if you bowl straight down the middle, you normally miss a couple of pins at the back. Once you have your strategy, the game never gives you a reason to try anything else. You pick a character you like and line up the same shot over and over and over again. You do have to time your shots with the normal bowling controls, but that only takes a game or 2 to get used to. Maybe the special balls are meant to be a disadvantage, to stop people doing the same shot for every frame. When there's an ultimate strategy you can use in a game, it doesn't take long for a game to run out of steam. You can get a perfect game with enough time, and when playing against friends, you will either easily beat them if they don't know how to get a strike, or both of you will have a way to get a strike each time, and it comes down to who gets unlucky with the pins and gets the most spares instead of strikes. All of this is especially true if you use the easy controls. This limits the replay value, and even if you never get that perfect game, getting a perfect game comes down to how long you're willing to repeat doing the same thing over and over again. Let's say you do want to keep playing, you love The Simpsons and you're really enjoying rolling the trackball. What options do you have? If you press the test button during demo mode, you can go into the setup menu. This menu is to help test the machine to ensure it's all working correctly, and it gives a few settings to change the game. This is where you can set the game to free play, meaning you don't have to keep putting money in the machine to play it. Interestingly, there's a difficulty setting, with the default being on medium. By changing this setting, you can make the game harder or easier if you want. From what I can tell, the only difference with the difficulty setting is that it changes the timing when using the normal controls. The green and yellow band that represents a successful throw changes depending on the difficulty, meaning the timing to roll can be more generous or more precise. It turns out when I was playing on the actual machine, the difficulty was set to higher than default, making the timing harder to pull off. This definitely helps and is a great option for those who want to make the game a bit more competitive, but it doesn't change what you're actually doing. You're doing the same shots for every difficulty, it's just a bit trickier to roll at the correct time. If you're playing on the actual machine, you also need to go into the setup menus, which, in a real arcade, you'll need to ask someone who works there to make that happen, and they may simply say no. If you want a different type of challenge, there is an alternative mode you can check out called Spares. In Spares, you're given a specific formation of pins to knock down. If you're able to knock them all down in one go, then you earn $100. If you don't, then the money is carried over to the next turn and you're given a new set of pins to knock down. You play 10 frames and your score is how much money you've been able to earn. This mode requires a much higher understanding of bowling than the standard mode, as you need to know the exact angle, spin and power to use for some of the harder formations. It certainly has a higher skill ceiling, and I'll admit I never got that good at this. If you're playing single player, it doesn't really give you much of a reason to care though. As the money carries over when you miss, it means if you fail the first 9 frames, the money will carry over to the final frame. If you then knock down all the pins, you get the full 1000 and achieve a maximum score. Unless you absolutely love bowling and figuring out the different angles and spin techniques, Spares should only be played with other people. In multiplayer, there is still only $100 available each turn. If one person knocks down all the pins and the other person doesn't, then the successful person keeps all the money. If everyone is successful, then the money gets split, and if no one can do it, then the money carries over. It works well as a way to score a multiplayer match, and everyone competing for the same cash prize does make each game much more competitive. The pin formations are randomly picked each time, so if you have a competitive friend who loves bowling, then this is a mode you can get lost in. It scratches a similar itch as the multiplayer modes in the Tony Hawk games, like the mode Horse. I don't know how engaging this mode is for most people. Regular bowling has much more broad appeal, and Spares doesn't video gamify bowling enough for it to be interesting to someone who isn't that fussed about bowling. I got bored of it quite quickly, honestly. It relies too much on learning the specifics of bowling, and the game doesn't have any way to help you learn how to get better. To improve at this mode, you need to use trial and error to figure out what to do for each formation, or look up real-life bowling tutorials and videos. That's cool in a way, but maybe a step too far for a Simpsons bowling game. When it comes to replayability, despite there being this extra mode, there isn't enough to the game. It's a bowling arcade game, it's not really trying to be that deep. If it provides some fun for some people at an arcade, then it's done its job. I do think it should have done more though. It's so weird to hit the skill ceiling so early on when playing a game. Being able to bowl precisely while adding spin to the ball is a big part of the skill of normal bowling, and for this game that skill is removed, as you can easily set it on the path you want it to go every single time with simple button presses. I have to admit that I never got a perfect game on the actual machine. My best score was with Marge getting a 2-7-A, so I never technically hit that skill ceiling. I was getting strikes more often than not though, so I got very close to the ceiling. I just didn't feel that pull to get even better than that. I feel like it's because they didn't do enough to make this more of a video game. Rolling the trackball feels good, but they never build on that. It's the same 10 pins over and over again, and instead of iterating on the bowling concept to create a new arcade game, they simplify the act of throwing the ball too much, and everything else is too close to actual bowling, which makes it repetitive. One of the ways they could have improved things is to lean more into the Simpsons theming, which brings me to discuss how well the game represents the Simpsons. When you start a game, there's a short cutscene showing Homer's workstation with a sign saying "Gone Bowling" and all the alarms going off. It's nice to see them not trying to force a story into the game. It's a bowling game featuring the Simpsons, that's all you need. This game didn't need a story, but I would have liked some type of fleshed out cutscene in the game. The Simpsons Arcade had the recreation of the opening, and the Simpsons Bowling could have done with something similar. Something fun to show off the different characters and 3D graphics. Speaking of the 3D graphics, The Simpsons Bowling has the honour of being the first ever Simpsons game in 3D. This wasn't the first time The Simpsons were seen in 3D, with the Season 7 episode Treehouse of Horror 6 coming out a few years before. There still wasn't that much reference material for what The Simpsons should look like in 3D by the year 2000, so as an early attempt to do just that, yeah, I think it looks pretty good. Other games in the late 90s that tried to turn a 2D cartoon into 3D simply did what they could with the tech at the time. Cell shading wasn't really seen in games just yet. The Simpsons Bowling opts to keep it to simple models. We don't have any black lines or any type of highlight to try and make it look like a cartoon. It's just 3D models with a bit of basic shading, so they're not just solid colours. Whether or not you like how The Simpsons Bowling looks will mostly depend on how much appreciation or nostalgia you have for the PS1 and 64 era. These graphics have all the usual downsides seen during that time, and it's hard to say with a straight face that this looks good.
Marge!
One of the things I love about Simpsons video games is that we get to see all these different interpretations and art styles for the characters, and The Simpsons Bowling has its own look that's very much tied to when it released. As we didn't get any N64 or Dreamcast Simpsons games and only got one PS1 Simpsons game, I appreciate that The Simpsons Bowling exists to help fill that gap. I can't say that this all looks great, but the effort was clearly there, and I have a soft spot for games that look this way. At the very least, this is a unique set of 3D models for all these characters. Let's go over the characters you can play as. There's Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, Mr. Burns, Apu, Willie, and Krusty. Each of them is either left or right-handed, and they each have their own set of stats, with the stats being power, straight, and curve. Curve is the only one that is clear what it does. The higher the curve stat, the more you can curve the ball when setting up your shot. To try and figure out what power and straight is tied to, I did a bit of an experiment. I played 10-frame games as Homer and Krusty and did the exact same thing every time. I bowled straight ahead with no adjustments to the curve or character position. I also selected the easy controls and pressed up on my keyboard to bowl, so the input was the exact same every time. This does mean that when there were spare pins on the side, I did just bowl straight ahead, so always missed. Krusty, who has a lower power and straight stat, ended up with a higher score than Homer. For Homer, each frame went one of two ways. He either got a fast ball and knocked down 9 pins, or he got a slow ball that knocked down 7. He got 4 fast balls and 6 slow balls, meaning that he ended up with a score of 78. Krusty's turns also were split between fast and slow balls. Fast balls would knock over 9 pins like Homer, but slow balls would knock over 8. Krusty got 3 fast balls, less than Homer did, but he still ended up with a higher score as Krusty's slow balls knocked over more pins. There was clearly a difference between the two characters. Doing the exact same thing every turn gave different results. The results just fell backwards as Homer with the higher power and straight stats should have knocked over more pins than Krusty. I ended up spending a lot of time testing each character, so I won't bore you with all the details and will sum up how I think this all works. Every character would either get a fast ball or a slow ball. Whenever a character got a fast ball, they always knocked down the same 9 pins. Regardless of the character, the same thing happens with a fast ball. The stats don't seem to matter at all when the ball is travelling faster. For the slow balls, the power stat is what decides what happens. Bart and Mr. Burns both have the lowest power stat, and they both will get 6 pins when getting slow balls. Not only that, but the pins would move the exact same way, despite them having a different straight stat. Marge, Lisa and Krusty all have the same power stat and would get 8 pins on slow balls. The power is tied to the ball's impact when it hits the pins, or alternatively how fast the slow balls go, and I believe it's some weird unintended quirk with how the pins move when hit, which means that the mid-tier power characters knock over more pins than the characters with the highest power stat. So what does the straight stat do then? Well, thanks to a guide written on GameFAQs, I was able to find out. This guide was written by Noiseland Co., who has done some great work covering all the different Simpsons games over on his own channel, so go check him out if you want even more Simpsons content. Anyway, the guide says that the higher the straight stat, the less chance there is for the ball to roll to the sides or for a missed roll. This translates into when you're using the normal controls, the green area will be bigger for characters with a higher straight stat, making it more likely for you to get a straight shot. It's something, I suppose, although if you're using the easy controls, then you can ignore the straight stat entirely. Ultimately, what this all means is that while characters do have tangible gameplay differences, you're completely fine to pick the character you like, rather than trying to pick the one that you think is the best. More power is good, but you can still win with a character like Mr. Burns by curving the ball and getting lucky with the fastballs. It once again comes down to finding that one setup in which you consistently get a strike, and that matters more than all these specific character stats. Back to the actual characters themselves, there's Homer, who's wearing his Pin Pals outfit from the Season 7 episode Team Homer. On the character selection screen, he's also holding a bag of Chippos, which is a snack seen in the show. The majority of the characters are wearing their outfits from the episode Team Homer. Mr. Burns and Apu have their Pin Pals uniform on, and Willie and Krusty are wearing their uniforms that you can see in the episode. It does make it stick out that Moe wasn't included as a playable character. He was on the team for that entire episode and is the only one that you can't play as. Bart is also in a bowling uniform, but I can't place it to a specific episode. The Simpsons Bowling released in 2000, so if it is a reference, it would have been from an episode from seasons 1 to 11. It looks like they put Bart in a bowling shirt and then made it red, so this is like a bowling version of his usual outfit. Marge and Lisa are the only characters that don't have bowling uniforms, instead wearing their usual clothes, which is a bit of a shame, although you can see that they are wearing bowling shoes. Each character also has their own bowling ball, and strangely there's no appearance of Marge's ball from the season 1 episode Life on the Fast Lane. It's an iconic moment from the show, and one of the most memorable moments involving bowling, so it's a weird thing not to include in a Simpsons bowling game. Before the Simpsons Bowling release, there were 3 episodes of the show that focused on bowling: Life on the Fast Lane from season 1, Team Homer from season 7, and Hello Gutter, Hello Father from season 11. The game mostly references Team Homer, with arguably no references to Hello Gutter, Hello Father. I say this as it is possible to get a perfect game in The Simpsons Bowling, but the white balloon with 300 on it doesn't appear. They do include their own celebration for a perfect game instead, with an extra graphic with Flanders on it, unique music that plays, and a different background on the results screen. There is also a secret 9th character that you can play as in this game. If you keep rolling the trackball up and down, you can land on Grandpa and select to play as him. Grandpa has the best stats in the game, having near max stats for power, straight and curve. This secret is one that works really well for an arcade game. If this was on consoles, I might have complained about it, as it's not something you're likely going to figure out for yourself. You either know about it or you don't. As this is an arcade game, you're going to be playing it in a communal space, which means if you don't know this secret, you may see someone else play as Grandpa and then they can show you the trick. You can then tell other people about it and pass that knowledge on. It's something that can help create nice moments, similar to sharing secrets and tips about games when you're a kid at school. They went for Grandpa wearing blue rather than his usual colours. Grandpa originally wore blue in the show, but they updated this for season 2. You could still see him in blue outside of the show quite a lot, making Blue Grandpa somewhat similar to Blue Shirt Bart. I like this choice. is a secret character, so him wearing different colors adds to the mystery and the feeling that you're playing as someone unique. The Simpsons Bowling is one of the many Simpsons games to have the official voice cast reprise their roles. 6 of the voice actors recorded lines for this game, meaning every playable character has their own voice lines. These voice lines are sadly missing from the emulated version. To hear them, you need to play on an actual machine. Each character gets their own voice line and animation when you select as them, as well as a variety of different lines that you hear during gameplay.
Hey! Oh, ow, my head! Well, my goodness, that was neat!
I tell you, it is alarming how charming I am feeling.
There's nearly a soul alive that can outpull Willie.
These include barking at the player if you're not doing anything, celebrating a great shot, or reacting to messing up. Every 2 frames or so, the game will cut to a shot of your character which shows them reacting to something that just happened. If you're playing with 2 or more people, you can get extra scenes where the other characters will react as well. It's all pretty entertaining stuff. It's all in character, and hearing your bowler speak with proper voice lines really helps make this feel more like The Simpsons. It's not hilarious really, but when every voice clip is a one-liner reacting to something happening in a game of bowling, there was only so much they could have done. I think they did a great job with these lines, and you get the occasional specific reference to the show as well. It's not afraid to be too harsh with the reactions. If you mess up, prepare for another character to mock you directly about it. There is an additional set of animations and voice clips that you can see when you finish a game, or if you're playing in multiplayer, by being the person who gets the highest score. These are all great and pretty funny as well. We've got Mr. Burns being scared by Maggie, Willie using his trophy as a mop bucket, and Mr. Burns using a gun to steal Apu's trophy. For Lisa's victory animation, they went with this.
Foolish human, you fell for my disguise. Today this bowling alley, tomorrow the world.
It's pretty surreal. It very much comes out of nowhere and isn't a reference to anything. It's just a joke how Lisa was actually Kang in disguise this whole time. Speaking of cameos from other characters, there's another set of voice lines you can hear if you either bowl too early, too late, or get a gutter ball. There are voice lines from Barney, Flanders, Moe, Nelson, Otto, the Sea Captain, Skinner, Smithers, and Wiggum, and any of them can speak whenever you don't throw the ball properly.
Yeah, that's really so.
That takes us to 19 characters with voice lines, and we can see even more characters in the game. In the background of the bowling alley, we have a range of characters, with all of these being 2D assets. There are 2 sets of characters you can see, one when looking at the character who just bowled, and another for when a different player is reacting to what's happening. In the background we can see Patty and Selma, Maud Flanders, Lenny and Carl, I think Alice Glick maybe, Sam from Moe's, Flanders, Jimbo, Kearney and Nelson, I think the old Jewish man, Principal Skinner, Otto, Mole Man, Lorraine Milhouse, Sea Captain, Cletus, Barney and Edna Krabappel. There's another character here who I would guess is Jacques from Life on the Fast Lane, although his hair and face don't really match up. Honestly, all these background characters look quite horrifying. They do their job of filling the background with familiar faces, just don't look at them too closely. There is one last character to mention, and that's Ken Brockman, who is the announcer for every game. Ken was used a lot as a commentator for Simpsons video games, and this wasn't even the first time, as that honour goes to Bart vs. the Juggernaut. This is the first time he's fully voiced though, and as Kent is one of the best side characters, it works well to have him commentate and add a bit of flavour to each game.
Up next, Homer Simpson. Are we looking at a true champ or a true chump? Up next, Grandpa Simpson. Let's see how many strikes he can get. And the winner is Simpsons.
For the rest of the bowling alley, the design comes from the Season 7 episode Team Homer. The background of the bowling alley has several specific elements from that episode, including the trophy that Mr. Burns takes for himself. The bowling alley looks good, but it feeds into one of my main issues with The Simpsons Bowling that I touched upon before. It's just bowling. There are no other stages available in the game. Whenever you're playing this game, it is always the same standard bowling alley. It would have added so much to the game to have different Simpsons themed areas to bowl in. Rather than only playing in Barney's Bowl-O-Rama, have it take place in different locations around Springfield. It didn't need to be so grounded. Bowling games already existed, so for a Simpsons themed bowling game, it could have gone much further. Bowling at the Quickie Mart, the nuclear power plant, or even the Simpsons house itself. It didn't need to be realistic and make sense. It needed to stand out and use the world of the Simpsons to make something more memorable. From a replayability and gameplay standpoint, one bowling alley isn't enough, and from a Simpsons game perspective, it feels subdued. It gets credit for featuring so many different characters and faithfully recreating Barney's Bowl-O-Rama, but it still lacks a sense of creativity. This game could quite easily be reworked to be any cartoon show from that time. If you created 3D models for the King of the Hill characters and swapped them in, you wouldn't know that this was originally a Simpsons game. That's everything of note about The Simpsons Bowling. No, wait a second, the game has a censorship system, so if you enter in something it doesn't like, then it'll change it to AAA. Okay, now that's everything about The Simpsons Bowling. I'm going to start my summary of the game by repeating myself once more. It's just bowling. In one sense, that's not a bad thing, as it does its job as a bowling game. Using the trackball works well, and it's an enjoyable way to replicate throwing a bowling ball. There's definitely fun to be had. It's easy to start playing, especially with the easy control option, so it's perfect to simply try out. You can jump on, have a round with a friend, and if you're a Simpsons fan, you can pick between 9 different characters from the show and enjoy all the voice lines. It's a bit of fun and a decent way to kill some time. There's unfortunately a real ceiling in terms of how much fun you can have with this machine. Once you get a good method to get a strike every time, you end up doing the same thing over and over again, and whether you get a perfect score or not depends more on luck. After that you can try spares mode, which does mix things up, but only if you really care about learning the specifics of bowling. The Simpsons elements are present but feel secondary to the bowling. This is a pure bowling game with the Simpsons added to it, rather than a Simpsons game that uses the concept of trackball bowling to make something new. It's okay, worth trying if you ever see it in an arcade, but there's likely going to be better machines around. There are more unique arcade games, games with more depth and better gameplay, and games that are better at recreating different sports and activities. It makes The Simpsons Bowling kind of forgettable, which likely explains why it's been pushed aside for so many years. It's hard to say much more about it, as it really doesn't go beyond being okay. As it is an okay game, it does make it quite easy to rank. It's clearly better than most of the list. There's fun to be had, and it has unique 3D character models and voice lines, so it's going above Bartman meets Radioactive Man and Escape from Camp Deadly. Due to how limited it feels, it's definitely not in the same league as a virtual Springfield, and if you only have time for one arcade game, the original Simpsons Arcade is still the one to play. Cartoon Studio can also feel a bit shallow, but that has a creative angle which gives it the edge. I wasn't sure if this was better than Krusty's Funhouse, and after giving it some thought, I'm going to say Krusty's Funhouse is better. Both Krusty's Funhouse and The Simpsons Bowling feel lacking as proper representations of the show. They're more concepts with The Simpsons slapped into them. With Krusty's Funhouse being a more fleshed out and complete game, I think that makes it better overall. I think there's more value in a puzzle platformer with a full set of levels than an arcade machine which feels good to play but grows thin after a few goes. That puts The Simpsons Bowling above Escape from Camp Deadly and below the Amiga version of Krusty's Funhouse. Covering this game has really been a journey for me, both literally and figuratively. I spent months trying to figure out how to cover this game, trying to understand what the situation was and reaching out to people only to hit wall after wall. This journey led me to a new city that I honestly had never heard of before, and ending up in an arcade museum in Germany. It means that The Simpsons Bowling exists in a weird space in my mind, where I had to separate the game's actual quality to everything surrounding it to try and break down whether it was any good or not. Whatever I was going to find at the end of all of this was always going to be secondary to that moment, to when I finally found the machine and got to play it for myself. It's unique in how rare it can be, and it was cool to have all my time and effort actually pay off. After all of this, of course it isn't satisfying to say, yeah, it's just a bowling game and it's okay. There's no big payoff to all of this. It's not a hidden gem or a complete disaster. There's only so much you can say about it. That's the reality though, and I'm only able to tell you that due to the few individuals working hard to preserve games like these. It's one of the most forgotten Simpsons games, one that you either have to play an incomplete version of through emulation, pay a lot of money to play it like I did, or be lucky enough to live near a working machine. I'm torn between being grateful that I was able to play it at all, and frustrated that it isn't more easily available. The Simpsons Bowling doesn't exist as a normal video game in my mind. It's more a relic. It's a part of Simpsons history that you can play, it just takes a lot of effort. If you're going to try and play it, it's not just to play a fun video game, it's more to check out this specific part of Simpsons video game history. Despite its status as something more forgotten, it does have this weird legacy if you look hard enough. Another Chicago-based publisher made a SpongeBob SquarePants bowling arcade game in the 2000s, and then in 2017, Family Guy got their own bowling game. Both of these also use a trackball, making them very similar to The Simpsons Bowling, although they look more fleshed out and honestly a little bit more interesting. Even though most people don't know The Simpsons Bowling exists, if Family Guy ripped it off, then it's fair to say that The Simpsons Bowling has earned its place as an official part of the Simpsons brand. And that's The Simpsons Bowling added to the list. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this look at The Simpsons Bowling, please consider giving this video a like or leaving a comment below. I'll see you next time for the Night of the Living Treehouse of Horror. This is another game that I've never played, so if I don't have to leave the country to check it out, then I'll consider that a win. What do you mean there's an arcade in Ireland that has The Simpsons Bowling as well? Then why did I go all the way to Germany?